Welcome to the NatSec Press podcast, a podcast unpacking national security research, books, and emerging issues in plain English. This podcast is built around taking research beyond the page, but occasionally we'll step outside that format to share useful resources and insights for people considering writing a book for NatSec Press or publishing more broadly. I'm Dr. Nicole Matich, and this episode draws from one of our author resources articles, exploring an important question. What does national security actually mean? Let's break it down. When most people hear the phrase national security, they tend to picture a fairly specific world. Intelligence agencies, military operations, classified briefings, counterterrorism teams, and while those things absolutely sit within national security, they're only part of the picture. The reality is much broader. National security isn't a single discipline. It isn't owned by one profession, institution, or field of expertise. It's really about understanding how societies identify, manage, and respond to serious risks, particularly risks that affect public safety, social cohesion, democratic systems, and resilience. And once you think about it that way, the boundaries of what is national security start expanding very quickly, because suddenly you're not only talking about intelligence and defense, you're also talking about cybersecurity, behavioural science, the internet, research ethics, emergency management, disinformation, organised crime, decision-making under uncertainty, and increasingly, the spaces where all these things collide, because many of the challenges we deal with today don't sit neatly inside one box. Take online radicalisation. Is that a terrorism issue, a technology issue, a psychology issue, a social issue, a platform governance issue? The answer is usually all of the above. Cybercrime is similarly broad. We often imagine cybercrime as hacking systems or stealing data, but increasingly cybercrime environments are becoming deeply human problems. Questions of persuasion, social engineering, manipulation, influence, trust. The technology matters, but so do the people interacting with it. Critical infrastructure sits within this conversation as well, because when people hear the term, they often think about systems like electricity grids, transport networks, water supplies, telecommunications, or hospitals, and those absolutely matter. But critical infrastructure is really about the systems and services societies depend on to function. The things people often don't notice until they stop working, or as the world recently found out, stop getting delivered. Increasingly, these systems are deeply interconnected. A cyber incident can disrupt banking systems. Supply chain failures can affect healthcare. Energy disruptions can create ripple effects across entire communities and economies, which means protecting infrastructure isn't only about protecting physical assets or technology. Understanding how systems fail, how risks spread, and how societies continue functioning under pressure is also part of national security. Supply chains increasingly sit within national security conversations as well. The past decade has reminded us that societies depend on sophisticated but highly interdependent global logistics networks. Most of us don't think much about supply chains until we can't get the products we need, or prices start to rise. But disruptions in one part of the world can quickly create consequences somewhere else, affecting businesses, healthcare systems, economies, and communities further downstream. Which means questions of national security increasingly include questions of dependency, and what happens when the systems we rely on come under pressure. Increasingly, questions of national security are also questions of economic security, which is why we hear a lot about sovereign capabilities, supply chain resilience, and the need for greater self-reliance. And that's why we think broadly about what national security is at NatSec Press. We're interested in the spaces between things, between policy and practice, between research and lived experience, between failing systems and human consequences, because that's often where some of the most important insights can be found. There's another misconception worth talking about as well. People often assume national security is primarily about protecting states, but in practice, security decisions are usually experienced most directly by individuals and communities. Security policies affect families, frontline workers, victim survivors, researchers, people living with the intended and unintended consequences of decisions made elsewhere. And sometimes the people carrying the greatest impact are also the people with the least power to shape those decisions. Which means understanding security isn't only about asking, how do we stop threats? It's also about taking a long-term view of policy settings and decision-making, asking who carries the consequences, what risks are being created, what trade-offs are being made, and who benefits and who bears the cost. Because security decisions don't exist in isolation, they shape real lives. That's also why context matters. At NatSec Press, we tend to favour work that connects ideas to practice, because understanding how things actually play out from policy to the real world matters too. NatSec Press exists to create space for careful thinking on these topics, for asking difficult questions, for acknowledging uncertainty, because national security work carries real-world consequences, and the conversations shaping that work matter. So perhaps the question isn't, is this national security? Perhaps the better question is, how does this issue shape risk, resilience, harm, or responsibility within society? Because if it changes how people live, how institutions function, or how societies respond under pressure, it's probably part of the national security conversation. Thanks for tuning in. Head to www.natsecpress.com to find notes and links from this podcast. Take care.